Speaking of happy, Stein, this is a Mavericks team not only happy with the win, but they're happy they're going to have some time off. In fact, they don't get on the floor until Friday when they take on the Brooklyn Nets here in Dallas. As best as you can you kind of outline what the next 5-6 days could potentially look like for the team, which I'm sure it will involve a lot of rest?
They're going to definitely take tomorrow off, and then during the week, they will take one full day off and otherwise practice 3 times before the Nets come to town. That was the way it was explained to me. So they will have
practice time in the middle of the season?
Yeah. So that's the thing. That's why you don't want to make it like 3 days worth of rest, because you also don't get these opportunities during the season. So again, tomorrow completely off. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, one of those days will be off. 3 full practices and at least one pretty strenuous one. And then they got the Nets in here.
Yeah, you don't find a lot of practice time during the regular season. So 3 practices in a week is, might as well be training camp all over again at that rate. Anything else that stood out from you tonight before we let you go on this Saturday evening?
AD, obviously great bounce back game. I think he had a point to prove and did so. And that guard combination, like we've talked long before the season, we talked about playmaking, ball handling, dribbling, passing, on-ball creation. And you heard Jason Kidd tonight. I'm sure Ron probably mentioned how Jason Kidd called Brandon Williams a Ferrari in terms of the speed injection he brings off the bench. And they've just got an interesting combo with Ryan Nembhard on a 2-way, Brandon Williams, who started last season on a 2-way. They've fashioned a 2-pronged point guard situation 20-something games into the season. If I am allowed a selfish plug, I would ask you to read my Ryan Nembhard feature on my Substack. If you haven't already, I put a lot into it, and I think that I've been getting this question so much. How do it wasn't 60 guys, there were only 59 in the June draft, but how do 59 guys get picked ahead of Ryan Nembhard? And I went into great detail to kind of explain that, look, late in the second round, in the 50s, there were teams that wanted to draft him at that point. At that point, having lasted until the 50s, and he knew how bad the Mavericks had been chasing Nembhard since the Chicago pre-draft camp. And my story kind of explains all that, goes into what his draft night was like. But really, at the end of the second round, Ryan Nembhard and his agents, Jafar Chufani and Todd Ramasar, they were getting calls from teams, we want to draft your guy. And at that point in the draft, they were saying, no, we'd rather be undrafted. We know we have a 2-way waiting in Dallas. He wanted to end up in Dallas. And for a franchise that I think we can politely say not a lot has gone right over the past 9-10 months, the Ryan Nembhard story is a good story, and one where the chips definitely did fall the Mavericks' way.
A couple other notable former Mavs whom are represented by Todd Ramasar, or I guess whom Todd Ramasar represents. AJ Lawson, longtime Mavs 2-way player and then on a full-time contract. And how about Omax Prosper? And of course, at the time, correct, on draft night, Omax was still on the team.
Yeah, hell of a job by the scouting department. With especially, Brandon Williams last year, now Ryan Nembhard this year. Hell of a job by them to be able to find a gem like this. It's funny because you mentioned, some of the stuff with the pre-draft work. Ime Udoka said during his pregame availability comments, the Rockets loved him, but one of the things that, kind of dissuaded them based off of how they felt about their team going into the year was his size. And it wasn't about anything about the player himself. It's just they felt like, from a size perspective, it just wasn't the right fit. So
I said I think it was either the night of the draft or the day after. I said if he was like 2 inches taller, he'd have been a first round pick.
Yeah. So again,
And look, he's been playing like a first round pick.
Oh yeah,
Now,
for sure.
It's only been 5-6 games. We can't get too carried away. But you see by the way he carries himself on the floor, he believes it's going to continue. He is unflappable out there. You know, Jason Kidd said over and over the calm that he brings to running a team. You know, Ryan Nembhard believes this is not just some 5-6 game flash, that this is, you know, he believes he can do this. And I'm glad you brought that stuff up about Ime. I missed his pregame press conference. I'm going to have to go back and listen to that. Because, yeah, I think obviously the size, you know, worked against him with a lot of front offices. And I think there's a lot of people that are saying, you know what, maybe we miscalculated there.